Hello and welcome to the Vedic Conversation, where each episode we take a different topic and look at it through the lens of storytelling and from the perspective of the Veda, an ancient but still very much relevant body of knowledge from India. I'm Rory Kinsella, a Vedic meditation teacher based here in Sydney, and I'm joined by my Vedic colleagues Anthony Thompson in London and Derrick Yanford in New York. Now, in this episode, we're mixing things up a bit and asking each other some burning questions that have been on our minds. So sit back and enjoy listening as Derrick asks Anthony what he considers his greatest life achievement. Then see how I struggle to answer when Anthony asks me about my creative role models, and I quiz Derrick about his biggest doubts about meditation. And this was a particularly interesting part of the conversation and led to a fascinating discussion about cults and whether Vedic meditation is a cult. Enjoy.
Hi, Derrick.
Hi, Anthony.
Now, you obviously enjoy being a teacher. What do you most enjoy about being a meditation teacher?
Great question. I mean, initially, the first thing that comes to mind when you said that, I would have to say is the moment that I feel that it's working, that the meditation is having the effect, and that there is some outward signal from my student's body that's telling me, aha, it's happened. And I'm really thinking back to the first student I had who had a bit of resistance and was skeptical about this particular style and if it was going to work. And so was I, to be honest. It was the first time, and I wasn't sure what to expect. And there was a moment at which I peeked open to see what was going on, and her head had fallen forward. And so for me, at that moment, it was very exciting because it's like, okay, I did it right. It must be working. So I think initially getting some kind of feedback from my students that lets me know I've done it correctly. But I think more recently, I have two students I taught back in November, who constantly update me and ask me questions and keep letting me know these little subtle things that they're noticing about their own experience. One about crying or letting go of anger, or just these things that, as we talked about the preview of coming attractions, they're starting to actually have the experience. And so that to me is really delightful because I feel like I'm having a direct impact on their life for the better. But I also really enjoy being in front of them, and because we've been in the virtual world for so long, it was a delight in November to teach in person these people who had never learned before and just kind of be in their presence. I've really missed that. I love the exchange. I love the communing. I love answering their questions. I love the whole bit of teaching, because I feel like the reason I became a teacher was I felt what was happening to me was so powerful that it had to be shared. It was something I couldn't keep to myself. And I didn't know what that path was going to look like. And when I embarked on it, I saw much more obstacles than I saw opportunity. And it took quite a bit of time. But now that I'm here, it is a delight to be of service in that way, because I think just like teaching dance, there was something about when I was learning and being trained that as I was able to master certain skills and the struggle that I went through, I felt what I gained was not only knowledge for myself, but a great understanding of how to teach someone else to do it because I had the personal experience. So the new desire becomes not, can I do this? Can I bring someone else to do that? Um, so same with meditation. And yeah, so witnessing that moment to see them actually, that head falling forward is probably the one that brings me the most delight. But all the other aspects, I mean, just talking about it right now, I'm kind of goosebumpy and giddy because we haven't been able to do it regularly. And I just, I taught for about a year, and then all of this kind of stopped everything. And as people are getting vaccinated and it looks like things might be going back to normal, I'm really looking forward to being in the throes of it again. But I love it all. I love being able to share. I think as a dancer, I didn't love performing. I've talked about this before. But what I did love was sharing the love of dance that I had with other people. So for me, it was more about, I feel so wonderful when I do this thing that I can't keep it to myself. So come and share in the joy that I get from dancing, as opposed to, okay, I've learned all this stuff, I have to show you what I've done now. And so teaching Vedic meditation, there's no performance. It is just, this is a delightful thing that I've learned. It has changed my life immensely. I would be remiss if I kept it to myself. And yeah, won't you come along? And when they do, and even, my first student, going back to my first student, the change that I saw in her from the first day to the last day was immense. And I've had that with these last two students in November. Their faces change. I should start taking photos, I think, of their faces pre-learning and post-learning, just for comparison. And it's magnificent. It's absolutely magnificent to be in the position I am to share this gift.
I think Jeff Kober takes before and after meditation pics. It's one of his art series things that he does. Not before and after learning, but I think before and after a meditation sitting.
I took a photograph of the student at the end of the first day. So they're standing in front of the puja table. There's the fruit, the table's a bit of a mess, and they've just had their first meditation and they're about to be sent home to do, with the instruction, you're going to meditate on your own. And they're just exciting. And, it's just the most, I was looking at it today and it actually just brought tears to my eyes because, some people I've only ever seen when I taught them, and then they just disappeared. And you just put out that love and trust that even if they only meditated once or twice on their own, even if it was only that, it changed something, that it had an effect of some sort. But I think, it's just, I completely concur with what you say.
I love the picture idea. I really feel like I would like to incorporate that for the reason you just said, and for myself, and maybe even collaborate, with Jeff and reach out, be like, oh, what would it be like if we just started photographing faces of our students? That would be an interesting.
I make it very clear to them that this is solely for my own use. It's not going to be published anywhere. It's not going to be used for any other reason. But in years to come, when we're on some retreat in India and we have a quiet moment in the evening, I can get out a photograph, get the album out and say, hey, this was you X years ago. Look how much you have changed.
Mm-hmm.
And, they probably won't even recognize themselves.
Exactly. It's a great idea, just to share with them, like we were talking on their anniversary of learning, hey, look, especially, I think everybody has challenges with consistency. So if you were to get, that reminder, look, oh yeah, great idea.
Actually, just on that point of, congratulating them on their anniversary, I offer them a 1 hour free one-to-one consultation as their gift, my gift to them on their anniversary. Not for their birthday, but for the meditation anniversary. And it's surprising how many people take it up.
Mm-hmm.
They go, oh yeah, just, because I'm making the first move, it's kind of made it just that little bit easier for them.
Mm-hmm. Also a great idea.
Yeah, I do a group meet up on 1 year.
Nice.
And they get
What the class of 2019?
That particular group that they were in.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And they do get an email every year saying happy mediversary.
Nice.
Which I stole off Light. Light does it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure. Guys, I promise you, none of my ideas are original. I too have stolen them from somebody.
Okay.
I'd very much like to share them with you. Don't want to hog them all for myself.
Do any of you have pictures from before and after? I would love to have seen mine. To be honest.
Yeah, I've got photographs of me at school. Couple of months before, and then a couple of months afterwards. And then actually what's interesting are the ones prior to teaching instruction, prior to IT and then post IT. Those are interesting too.
Okay, yeah. Huh. Oh, good stuff.
Okay, so my question for Derrick is at the other end of the scale. So mine is, what's your biggest doubt about meditation?
Oh. Great question. And it's so interesting that you're asking me right now, because initially when I came off of training, I had many doubts that ranged from what did I just do? Like, am I in a cult? Kind of a thing. To disbelief of, I started researching a little bit other people's experience and kind of went in the opposite direction, because so much of what my experience had been positive. And so I think my biggest doubt, the one that I'm sitting with now, that I'm having difficulty reconciling, because I want to preface that my own personal direct experience with meditation in this community has been wonderful. It has been amazing. I wouldn't change it at all. I'm so fortunate to have found it in the way that it found me. Since graduating, I have inadvertently done what seems to be research on cults and cultish behavior and what makes a cult and their similarities and these kinds of things. Because there's part of me that wants to build a very robust community. And I have these thoughts of, what if, I built this place and only Vedic meditators live there, or we did all this kind of stuff, And then I think, that's not necessary. That's not what it's about. And if I were to go down that path, could I maybe start with great intentions, but take it to something that doesn't need to be. And so applying that lens to Vedic meditation and TM and the way that it was brought here to the West with Maharishi, my doubt is that there is maybe some secrecy or things that have been veiled to make the practice maybe a little bit more attractive that I think doesn't necessarily need to be so. And I guess my biggest thing is, how deep do I want to go in uncovering that? Because I believe there is, people in the TM organization who learn from Maharishi were, the same technique that we were taught, who have had nothing but amazing, wonderful, great experiences, live and die by his word. And then there's people who say completely opposite, different kind of things. And so not having ever known him and only kind of having the positive information that I've gotten, I'm curious to explore the dark side. And I think it starts with having those doubts. Is there validity to what people have said? And why is there seems to be this secrecy kind of a thing? And what I found really interesting, that one of the things that cults do is they create secrecy around certain ideas so that it intrigues the followers, because they want to cross that barrier and get into the knowledge. So if you want people to become interested in something, tell them that they can't have it. That immediately draws people's attention. So I believe that those kinds of policies have found their way in, not only into Vedic meditation, but into the wellness space a bit. And is that necessary? I doubt that that's necessary. Now, if you want to create a large following, a big movement per se, then if you make it exclusive and if you make it tiered, and there's levels and all these things, I could see how attractive that could become, especially for people who are looking for answers to huge life questions. I just recently watched again for the second time Wild Wild Country. And having watched it before and now knowing what's coming, the question that's always on my mind is people who, the state of mind and the state of consciousness they were in when they were in the throes of it, where they felt like this is amazing, it's love, it's great, to this shift that it takes where they start to go, something's not right, but they stay. And then the point where they go, this is out of control. We are now engaging in behaviors we never would have, but they've spent so much time. It's almost as to wake up, they have to deny this huge part of what they've either witnessed or experienced, which is really difficult. And then stepping back away from it, 20 years and go, oh, hindsight is 2020. So I wonder, am I doing that to an extent? Am I actively ignoring some of the things that give me pause around secrecy, hierarchy, and things of those nature? And am I doing it? Why am I doing that? There's something about it. It's this, I would say. I believe that this technique, much like many others in the wellness space, has this mystique that if we pull back the curtain, this is the fear, that we don't want people to see the man behind the curtain. And to me, I think revealing the man behind the curtain is actually probably the most powerful thing that we can do, because for me, it allows me to say, there's all this value and benefit that I'm getting, that I can offer my students. And it doesn't need to be the Wizard of Oz man in the sky presentation. I can still give all of these amazing things, but from a much more, I'm a regular person. These are regular things that we're doing. We're just doing them in a fashion that produces extraordinary results. And that's it. But I don't believe the way that I was taught. It still has some of that. It still has, and I doubt if it's needed. And I'm curious as to what that looks like in my journey to uncover.
Yeah. Very interesting. So yeah, it reminds me of watching the Scientology documentary. I can't remember what it's called, but that idea of levels. And there are levels in VM. We can't deny it. There are different courses you can do, and there are multiple numbers of them. Yeah, and they all cost more money. And it's interesting that idea of, what is a cult. And I think it's important that, Vedic meditation is the way we talk about it. It's a householder practice. It's for people who live in the world, who have relationships and jobs, etc. So when it gets taken, like it did in the 60s and 70s, into those communes, then it's no longer a householder technique. You're like in Wild Country, they're more like sannyasis. It's much more monk-like. So it's a very interesting topic. Maybe we do a whole episode on is VM a cult?
Well, the Leah Remini Scientology series that I think started in 2016, I had never seen up until a few months ago. And I found them riveting. Because again, I didn't know what it was really all about. And as she's revealing this whole, idea about thetans and in the body and Xenu, that sounds absolutely ridiculous, that people still, hook, line, and sinker, are all in. But to also, I guess that this is the thing I want to keep my eye on. When it becomes obvious that asking questions is not allowed, that's like okay, something's really wrong, even with religion, and I've heard someone say, all religion really is cult plus time. That's a religion. There's a charismatic leader, there's some kind of fundamental principle or idea that people rally around. They create culture, they sing, they do things together. And if that lasts over a long enough period of time, well, you have yourself a religion, kind of a thing. So I'm always, as much as I'm always like, because I do believe I believe that the world would be a better place if everyone on the planet engaged in a type of meditation? 100%. Is there a part of me that wants to facilitate that? Absolutely. But at the same time, when I have that propensity to do that, I almost move in the opposite direction, because I feel like that was the thing that became the downfall, is everybody getting into those groups and doing it so intensely that's part of the outcome. You run the risk of it becoming something unintended. And so let's keep it more free. Let's keep it, let me move around all the time and just not have to have, like, even as a dance teacher, make no mistake, when I was in New York training, there were teachers that I studied with that would have a flock of students who took their class religiously, and they would interact with them outside of class in a certain way. And it became a little worshipy kind of a thing, which I never got into because I was just like, I want to dance and I want to whatever. I don't care if I'm popular. I don't, because there's something about that I don't want. And so when I became a teacher, I never did that. I never engaged in conversation with my students after class. I didn't hang out with them at other places because I wanted to really always maintain that teacher student dynamic. I didn't want the lines to become blurry. Um, so I think I do that kind of already naturally as a teacher. I keep my distance, but we'll see. I don't know.
The other interesting thing about that, the Scientology documentary, whichever one, I think it was Going Clear, the one that I saw, is that it seemed at the beginning parts of it, it seems really quite normal. Like these questions where you go, oh, that would be interesting to get rid of those things. And it even sounds quite, meditation-y. It's like getting rid of those stresses. I'm just like, well, okay, well, this all sounds fair enough. But it's I guess the skill with which they turn that completely normal, get rid of these stresses and psychological things from your past into, we have these aliens landing in a volcano.
So what I love about, I went to Clearwater because I'm not that far from it now. And I had seen in her documentary, there was the headquarters and how they had like eaten up all this real estate. And I actually went in to use the bathroom. And I was asked if I wanted to take a survey. And I said, no, thank you. I'm good, because that's kind of the gateway in a little bit. And it's just what I didn't know about L. Ron Hubbard is that he, I think still to this day, he holds the Guinness Book of World Record of most books published. He has over 1,000 something publications. And early in his career, he was a pulp fiction writer. And so a large part of his content is science fiction. And so when you take that, and then when you hear the other things about what people said about the relationships that he had with his children and all these things, as an outsider, you're like, okay, yeah, I see it. It's crazy. And that's why for myself too, I'm going, are you ignoring is there some crazy that you're ignoring? That for as me as an outsider, you can see, oh yeah, this is all fiction. He made it all up. He wanted to start a religion. They have, him quoting those kinds of things and whatnot. So I don't know. I'll keep doing my research and just hopefully always stay cognizant if and when I start to move into the cult like direction.
Well, let us know how you get on. But I think you touch on a very interesting aspect, which is the power of suggestibility and the consciousness of all the people involved, both the victim, if you want to call them that, the client, the punter, the person who's paying the money, and the teacher, the manipulator on the other side. And as a basic human need, we all want to belong. And this goes back, I don't know if you've read Homo Sapiens by Harari. I mean, it is just fascinating. I know Rory and I have had a little conversation about this, but going right the way back 300,000 years ago, if you didn't join in and belong, you were an outcast and you were probably going to get eaten. Right? So this very fundamental desire to connect and belong is very, very deep rooted. And if there's something that charms you and you would like to take a step forward towards it, and you can see a door that is there to be opened, that you can open it, or maybe the door is already open and you can step through and you can have a little look around. You say, well, this is actually very interesting. This is the kind of space that I would like to hang out in, and actually look at all these very charming people. They're interesting and engaging. I'd like to hang out with these people too. And so you can see how you just eventually fall down the rabbit hole. And there are a lot of rabbit holes out there.
I will be sending invitations to my cult soon.
Can I be in one of the
Just-
higher echelons?
Yeah.
well, Rory, I mean,
I can't
gonna have to-
pay, but I'll do anything else.
we're gonna have to do
I
some
just want to be
work
at
on you first.
the top of that pyramid. That's fine.
Hi, Anthony. So, one of the things that I love about this project of the podcast that we've started is that I've gotten to know you and Rory so well. And every episode, I feel like I learn something new about you. And so, my question for you is, what would you consider your life's greatest achievement to be, and why?
I think my greatest achievement is being right here and now. Just being absolutely here and having made good use of all the years that have gone by, and not to have beaten myself up about some of the terrible things I've done and said and some of the behavior I've had, but to take all that and to understand that I am utterly human and I'm just like everybody else, and that there is this immense capacity for compassion, love, connection, commitment, involvement. And I think it's pulling all of that into right now. I'm not really interested in tomorrow, but I mean, inevitably, you and I were talking a little earlier about having a calendar or a diary or an agenda and using that. And yes, of course, we are always, putting things in the diary, planning, okay, what's happening next week, next month, and at the end of the year, of course we are. But that's not really where I want to be. I want to be right here, right now. And so I think it sounds a little bit strange. It's not as though it's an achievement to be here on this particular day because I've had such a tough life or I've overcome illness or anything like that. It's just that here I am with all my dents, all my scars, all my flaws, and I love all of those. I wouldn't change a thing because that has brought me to this position as the person I am, and I just want to offer that. I've got nothing to hide. Here I am.
That's beautiful and powerful.
Thank you.
It's interesting because I was trying to think of mine, like when I was thinking of questions, I was like, what's mine? And I felt like, because you started meditating so long ago, you've had family, you've had businesses, you've lived a life, you've had this life. I guess I was not expecting that as an answer at all, and yet that's so powerful. It's really, really powerful. Thank you for sharing that. I'm a little chilly. I'm like, wow, okay. Gorgeous.
Okay, so I guess my question's related to a little bit of Derrick's comment there about your long history of meditating. So I think I'm correct in thinking that you had your 50th meditation anniversary recently. So my question is, talk to us about your actual experience during meditation and how it's, if at all, it's changed over that 50 years.
Well, as you say, Rory, I learnt in November 1970 when I was 15, and it was a very straightforward experience. I wasn't under any peer pressure or social pressure to do it. I was attending a very progressive school where opportunities were given to the kids to try anything from beekeeping to extra Greek to forming a jazz band. I mean, anything you wanted to do, it was kind of available. And we were encouraged to try anything that appealed to us, follow the charm. And I just put my name down for this. I wasn't interested. None of us would ever be interested in who else has signed up, have any of my mates, or has the cool guy in my year group. That was just not part of the thinking process. And so when I started, I went into it very innocently. And of course, you've got to remember, in 1970, there was no internet. It was extremely difficult to communicate with your friends because using the telephone was very expensive, and you usually had to use it, certainly in the UK, after 6 o'clock in the evening, and you always had to get your parents' permission, and you couldn't talk for very long. And so sometimes it was just easier not to talk to your friends until you saw them again, maybe back at school or elsewhere. And meditation had sort of been on the horizon a little bit, had been a part of the zeitgeist, because obviously in '68, the Beatles had just come back from they went to Rishikesh and then they came back. And, this, like many schools, many then and now, all the kids were crazy about music, current music. And, we were all swapping albums and, hey, you got to listen to this. And what about that? And wow, that's really interesting. And one of the things about the Beatles was that their music changed so dramatically, having been to India. Their album prior to their Rishikesh trip was Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, where they'd actually changed the name of the band. They were no longer the Beatles, they were Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. So they were in a process of reformulating their identity. And then they go to Rishikesh, and then they come back and they produce the White Album, and it's like, wow, what is that? This is completely different to is this the same band? There's sort of echoes of similarity, but this is very different. And then, of course, George Harrison, who was a particular favorite of mine, always had been and still is, went off in a slightly different direction. And so that was all kind of very interesting. And my very first experience of witnessing somebody meditate was probably around about that time. I remember watching TV with my parents. At that time in the UK, there were only, I think, 2 channels, black and white. And I don't know why we were watching it, but there was a science program, and there was this Western laboratory with guys in sort of white coats and looking very serious, and they had this huge airtight chamber with a door, and this elderly Indian gentleman who was wearing just a loincloth, had very long hair, long beard, very thin, quite wizened, very brown, was led in, and he sat on the floor of this chamber, which was about the size of a very small room. It's probably about 6 foot in every direction. And they shut the door and they sealed it all up, and there was an observation window. And there was only a certain amount of oxygen in the room. And, the commentator was saying, he's been in there now for 2 hours, and the researchers are looking in through the window. They're very concerned. He seems to be, he of course was meditating, but he seems to be as though he's fallen asleep. And has he died? And they get panicky, and they open up the door, and he comes out of his meditation and steps out, and they then ask him, what were you doing? And he said, well, I was meditating. Well, they knew he would be meditating, but, and was it okay? And were you losing breath? He said, no, everything was fine. And it was such a strong and such a dramatic image that's always stayed with me. And so this point that we often have in Vedic meditation, that when we're meditating, our most relaxed state in the meditation could be 2 to 5 times deeper than the deepest point of sleep, because we're only consuming 2 to 5 times less oxygen than we are at the deepest point of sleep. And so that little documentary clip proved the point. So then we fast forward, and I'm meditating at school, meditating in the holidays, and it just becomes part of my routine. And of course, I rather naively thought that every school had meditation, because we all had every school had a jazz band, and because we weren't communicating, it was just an assumption that meditation was available to everybody, which of course wasn't the case. And in fact, at that time, it was probably the only school, having spoken to the master who introduced it to me and arranged for TM to come down to the school, he knows from the TM organization that this was the only school in the UK at that time that was offering meditation. And over the period of time when it was offered at the school, there were about 250 kids, and I think 3 of us have become teachers. And then, of course, I leave school, I get a job, I'm living at home, I'm doing a sort of job to raise money to go traveling. And it's once I hit the road, I'm traveling to the Middle East, that, I kind of come across, I'm really in communities of other people, adults, and I'm kind of looking around. Are there any, is there anybody meditating? Is everybody talking about meditation? Nobody is. Bit strange. So it's okay, I do my own thing. Then I get to university, and there are 1 or 2 people doing it, but they're mostly into Zen, Buddhist meditation, and we don't really sort of connect, and I'm kind of doing it. And then when I leave uni and get a job, I then really find myself out there on a limb. I'm in the wilderness, that I know no fellow meditators. I have no access to teachers because my teacher disappeared. The internet, as I say, didn't exist, so I couldn't look people up. There was the yellow pages, there was nothing in that. And so I just thought, okay, maybe this is just the way it is. I'm very content, but nobody thought I was kind of weird because I kept it very privately. I just do it in my room. I didn't speak about it because I didn't think it would be of interest or relevance to anybody else. And it wasn't until I then, came to London, got a job, and things started to get a little bit rocky then. My meditation practice started to slip a little bit. I was traveling a great deal. I was under immense pressure, targets, performance data to meet. And that would have been just such a great moment if I had had a meditation teacher or a group that I could connect with. And meditation, again, at that point wasn't really, we're talking about the late 70s, wasn't really kind of mainstream. And there I was married at that time. I had 2 small children. I think my 3rd child was on the way. And domestically, personally, life was getting a little bit rough. I wasn't particularly happy. And I thought, I really need to put some effort into finding somebody. And I was kind of looking in the yellow pages again. And then one day in the evening paper, there was just a little box advertisement that just said, do you want to learn to meditate? It had a telephone number. I thought, well, I don't know if it's the same style of meditation, but I'll give them a call. And I called them and they said, yes, we are TM. And, why don't you come along? It sounds like you need a refresher. Why don't you come along to a group meeting? I thought, great. And it was in central London. It was not so far away. So I went along one evening. And I remember walking into this room. I just cannot remember. It was somewhere near Oxford Circus, somewhere there, I think. Can't remember specifically. But I remember walking into this room and there were probably about 12 people there. And I recognized somebody in the audience. And he was a guy that I'd come across. I was working in the art world, and he was a dealer in the art world, and he was kind of crazy. And actually he was, as the Americans would say at the time, it was quite a popular expression, he was obnoxious. He was very obnoxious. He was just a kind of really difficult guy, quite aggressive, just a bit of a pain to deal with. And he was in the audience, and I thought that immediately kind of put me on red alert. I thought, I'm not sure if this is his kind of scene. I'm not sure that it's mine. Anyway, the teacher kind of gave us a sort of run through of what the meditation technique was like, and I just couldn't relate to it at all. It just didn't make any sense, or very little of it made sense. And I left that building a little bit dejected, and I thought, okay, well, I've got this thing. I'm using it. It works. I think it's working okay. I think it could work better. I'm just going to have to carry on searching. And it wasn't until probably about 8 years later that I'd taken up yoga. I was very into Ashtanga yoga. And I'd been practicing that for probably 3 or 4 years at the time. And in London, we have a thing called the Yoga Show. and it'd be all these different companies, different styles of yoga, all on show, and you could buy all the props, and you could hang out with other yogis, and it's all very sort of cultish, perhaps. But no, it wasn't cultish, but it was kind of just a gathering of like-minded people. And walking around, I came across a stand which was completely empty and looked so different from all the other stands, which were crammed with props and posters and people and noisy and cluttered. And this stand was just 3 white walls, and it just had a banner at the back which said, "Do you want to learn to meditate?" And there was this very attractive lady just beaming. She was standing there just exuding this warmth and love and radiating sort of, just good vibes. And I went up to her and I said, what? Yes. And she said, would you like to learn? And I said, well, I already know how to meditate, but I'm looking for somebody who can, help me on my way. And she said, well, I'm a Vedic meditation teacher. And I said, well, what's that? And she said, it was a bit like, it's very similar to TM. I said, well, that's what I practice. She said, great. She said, why don't you come along to my house and, I'll get you back on track. I said, fantastic. Where do you live? She told me. It was literally 5 minutes walk away from my home. She said, come in 3 days' time. I went. She said, do you remember your mantra? I said, yes. She said, close your eyes. We'll meditate together. That was it. That's all I needed. I just needed somebody to sit beside me and just tell me to meditate, which I'd been doing anyway. But just the reassurance that I was then back, or not back, but the reassurance that I was in the hands of somebody who could look after me, because I'd never had that for 37 years. I had never been to a group meeting. I had never had a follow-up session with a teacher. I had never had a community of like-minded meditators to belong to. And suddenly this door is opened and I joined this group of people, and it's intoxicating. It's just the most exciting, thrilling thing. And of course, my foot hit the pedal and that was it. I was off, and, under great teaching and guidance and care and mentorship, here I am. I don't know if that answers your question. But it's changed.
Who was the lady in the booth?
It was Gillian Lavender.
Aha, beautiful.
It was Gillian. Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
And so, what's fascinating is that by the time when I met her, which was about 18 years ago, meditation was beginning to become something that was being spoken about quite commonly, quite frequently. And then, of course, in the last decade, it's become very much part of the zeitgeist. And then with the proliferation of apps and, everybody having mobile phones, the whole thing just kind of bursted. And so it's the landscape today is completely different. But I think, looking back on that very long-winded story, apologies, the fascinating thing about it is that through all those 37 years, it was the same mantra. The mantra obviously changed and developed, and then it came back to its former self and so on and so forth. So there was some modulation in the mantra. I was aware of that, but I didn't worry about it. But it was the purity, the simplicity of the technique. All I had to do was find somewhere fairly quiet, sit down, shut my eyes and do it. That's all I had to do. It wasn't hugely difficult. And I think if it had been something very complicated and overly demanding, I would have given it up years ago. But it's just the simplicity of the technique and the gift that the technique gives you, which was endlessly rewarding. And that's what just powered me through all those kind of crazy years.
Yeah, it's amazing to have 37 years in the wilderness. 'Cause the thing that's good about going to group meds, or, I find myself in my own group meds that I run, that I repeat myself every week, as all teachers do. And it's repeating those simple instructions of don't use effort, etc., etc. And which I remember going to my teacher Tim and just being like, oh yeah, like because I would just forget, these simple instructions and just go, no, it's about thinking the mantra and only thinking it. So I think that if I was off on my own for 37 years, I'd end up forgetting some of those key points. For me, it's always the effortlessness thing, and I'm like, no, I just want to nail this. So yeah,
I think what's interesting is that it just sort of organically, it kind of worked itself out. I'm sure there were moments when I was trying and moments when I got frustrated and didn't think it was working. But because I'd already received so many benefits from it, it was one of those things that I was kind of, quite honestly, probably quite frightened of giving it up because I didn't really want to experience life without it. That wasn't really something that I felt was attractive. And so, yeah, I'm sure I was holding on to the mantra and making all those sorts of mistakes. And then, nature does its wonderful thing and just says one day, hey, you don't have to hold on anymore. You can let go. It's okay. I've got you.
Yeah. And that's great to hear because, we've all had students that we've taught and then never see again. And it's, we don't have to see them every week for them to be able to be getting the benefit. And it's kind of like you described, it's built in that it will sort itself out. It's like a self-writing.
I was doing a funny thing today. I was kind of going through my list of students, just reminding myself who they were and just checking their birth dates and anniversary dates and so on and so forth. And, there were some lovely people I've taught who I've never seen since the day I taught them. And, I was just thinking about them and, wondering how they were. And, when I finished, took quite a long time to get through this list. And I kind of just closed the file and I was actually very emotional about it. I just thought, all these people, some of them are probably having my kind of experience. They've kind of just gone out there into the wilderness and for whatever reason, they're treading that path and that's okay. And then I've got all these other people that I kind of know a little bit better, but I love them all, unconditionally. They all have my love and support, whether they're in touch with me or not. And just kind of putting that out there is, well, it certainly helps me. and I sincerely believe it helps them.
It's a beautiful story. Gorgeous.
So, Mr. Kinsella, I have a question for you, sir. Don't be frightened. You can have do you want a little drink before this one? Or is water I'm talking about. Now, you're a multi-talented, creative person. Who are your creative role models and what do they bring to your teaching of Vedic meditation?
Ooh. Who are my creative role models? And what do they bring to my teaching? It's a very good question. Maybe I'll just, maybe it'll come to me as I start talking. But definitely the idea of the creative process. So if we start by talking about the creative process rather than particular creators, that definitely plays into the way I teach, specifically around, and I've probably talked about this before, but from my experience of writing a novel, this idea that inspiration comes when you start the process. So the quote that I used to have above my desk when I was writing my novel was, inspiration is the act of drawing the chair up to the writing table, which, you may have heard me say before, but it was so key to me going from someone who didn't have a novel to someone who had a first draft of a novel. Because if you're the sort of person who waits for the muse to strike, then you're going to do it once a month, maybe once every couple of months. You're waiting for that weekend afternoon when you've got nothing else to do and you're just feeling, I've got my creative juices are flowing. And that kind of, I think that way of thinking about stuff is so important for creating a daily meditation habit, because it's easy to be that kind of person who's like, oh, I'm on a spa weekend, I'm going to do my meditation, or it's a 4-day weekend and for some reason I've got no plans, I'm going to do my meditation. Whereas to get real results, it's about going through the process of, I'm just going to do it whether I feel like it or not. And that's definitely informed the way I teach, where it's about just doing it, and the results will come from doing it. And you may feel the least kind of zen at all, that's the time to do it. That's the time to sit down. It's the same with the creative process of just going, I've started writing and I'm just writing crap. Like that's the worst sentence, the most cliched idea that's ever come out of anyone's mouth. But I compare that process of having that rubbish come out before, you might only get a couple of good sentences in a half an hour's writing, say. That's like, I was teaching a course yesterday and people were like, well, it was rubbish for the first 10 minutes. It was just thought after thought after thought. And then the second half was really good. I felt really relaxed. And I'm like, great, that's correct. You're doing it right. And it's like with writing, you're supposed to write some crap. Like we've all got this rubbish in there. You get through that. It's the price of the good stuff is having done the bad stuff. It's like the price of that deeper part of meditation is having that shallower part. And we can't avoid that. And I think for both the creative process and meditation, when we're inexperienced in it, we think that we can just hijack straight into that golden zone where maybe in the 4-day course you'll transcend and you're like, right, I'm now a transcender. I'm going to book me into that every single time. And this was definitely my experience of going, well, what's the trick? What's the magic password? I want to be able to go straight into that. And it's similarly with the writing, if you go, right, I've written this article or this chapter that people really like, and then you have this idea that I'm of that standard and I'm always that standard. But then you're creating these expectations and then you can't do anything because you write a sentence, you go, oh no, that's not that standard. Let me try again. No, delete, write that word again, delete. And you can't get anywhere. So it's the similarity for me is, and this is a key element of our teaching, it's process orientated, not outcome orientated. And what I love about getting older and experiencing more different aspects of life, and this is creativity, but also learning different, like I did a swimming course a couple of years ago, you start seeing, and I was talking to my dad about this, you start seeing all these similarities between different disciplines or different areas of life where so for the swimming, as an example, it was an effortless type of swimming. It's called total immersion swimming, where you do half as many strokes as normal swimming, and you kind of glide through the water. And I was like, this is like meditation in the water. And the amazing thing, about getting older and continuing to look into new things and learn new things is go, well, hang on, there's this similarity that runs between each of them, and you can see those things that kind of color and shade other aspects, other disciplines that you're following. And that's, as a teacher, I think it's great to have had more and more experiences. So me as a teacher at 43, I think I'm now a much richer teacher than I would have been if I'd started teaching at 22. And similarly at 62, I'll probably have a lot richer way of describing things, so that when students ask a question or have a problem or something, you can speak in their kind of language, whether they're, I was teaching in a business setting yesterday, so I can use, examples from my corporate career, or if someone's sporty, I'll talk about marathons or something like that. So I think everything that we've done, and Derrick, you always talk about your dancing, it's such a great way to become relatable. Because if we only talk in abstract things, like if I only talked about transcending in the being state, I can see people's eyes glaze over a bit, because it's like, well, I don't know what that means. Whereas as soon as you start talking about, oh, well, I had this situation and I felt like this and then I felt like this, it becomes a lot more relatable. So I guess I didn't didn't answer your question, but from that idea of not so much them as a creator, but the way that they talk about writing. I think it was Murakami that I got some of that writing process stuff from. So maybe, and there's also a really good Stephen King book about writing. So I think I like those meta things about the craft rather than the creators themselves, in terms of moving from one discipline to another.
Fascinating. Thank you. And any musical influences, any songwriters or poets?
So I'm just kind of personally things that. Well, so I did my master's in Shakespeare. So Shakespeare's he's my guy.
I did not know that.
Yeah, it was. So at the time, so when I finished university, my story is that in the week that I graduated, I didn't have any good kind of career plans. And I'd always played guitar when I was growing up. And then I bumped into my friend on the week of graduation, and I was like, oh, how are you doing? She was like, great, my band that I'm in, we've got a record deal. And I was like, awesome, that's amazing. And she then said, yeah, it's really good, except our bass player's just left. And I was like, I'm a bass player. And that kind of led into doing music for the next couple of years. But then that also meant that I knew that I wouldn't be able to get a proper job. So I thought, my family will support me to study a bit longer. And we were the last year that didn't have to pay for tuition fees, which was amazing. So there were a few master's degrees. I did English at my uni, and it was either Shakespeare, Chaucer, which is like Middle English, really hard to understand. The Romantic poets who I really liked, like Wordsworth and Coleridge, and something else. So I picked Shakespeare because it was the most pretentious. but thinking about it in a kind of Vedic way, the Romantic poets are a lot more aligned with what we do. So if you read any of Wordsworth's poems, like, it's very kind of mindful. It's very being in nature and seeing like this oneness in nature. So rather than going through we use a mantra to get to that state of oneness with the universe, they would go and walk in the Lake District and sit in tranquility in the grass looking at the lake, and they would get these enlightened experiences, which they were then able to beautifully craft into these amazing poems, which give us they can take us on that mini enlightened journey of going through their thought processes. So yeah, maybe if I went back, I'd do the Romantic poets instead.
You could do that for your PhD.
Yeah. Well, both my dad and my older sister got PhDs in the last 10 years or so. So maybe it's a Kinsella thing where we just have to have one.
Fantastic. Go for it.
Interesting. I thought I knew a lot about you. I know nothing about you. But I want to ask a question that maybe is a little bit related to what the last part of what you just said. Because the thing that I think that I know about you is that you seem to have an idea about something. You set like this goal about it, and then you do it, like with the marathons, like all these things kind of pop up and you like just do these things. So I'm curious, what is something you had as a goal for a long time that you've given up on, and why?
Cool. This is an easy one for me, and it does link into that novel writing thing that I was mentioning before. So that was my big goal. So when I moved to Australia in 2009, I decided that I wanted to get more into writing. So I did these creative writing courses that led into writing the first draft of a novel over, I think it took 5 years. And the year that I finished that first draft of the year after I learned to meditate was the year that I managed to write the novel. And that was, I credit meditation with having given me that it's process orientated, that kind of idea of you put in the time every day and you'll delete the stuff that is no good. So I credit meditation with allowing me to get that first draft of the novel down. But over the next couple of years, as I meditated more and more, and then 2 years later when I decided I wanted to do teacher training, it was the year that I did teacher training that I realized that I didn't want to write the second draft of the novel, because I was thinking about, why, what's my why of doing the novel? Because I think, in the course they were probably like, you have to know what your why is. So I think I'd said something like, I want to entertain and educate and inspire people through my story. But then, having kind of been doing the teacher training, I was like, well, hang on, if I want to inspire and educate people and, enrich their lives, I can do that so much more successfully as a meditation teacher than as a writer. And this was having read my own first draft and judged it for myself. So I decided at that point that I didn't want to spend a whole nother year writing the second draft. And you can write 7 drafts of a novel and it's still be no good. So I realized that because I had a full-time job through all of this, I realized that my extracurricular time and energy was limited, and having had the experience I'd had of becoming a Vedic meditator, I was like, well, hang on, this is the real deal. This is so life-changing for me personally in changing my conscious state and changing my subjective experience from one of being kind of having lots of anxieties and being very future orientated and spending a lot of mental energy thinking about the future, to being able to live more comfortably in the present and to be able to be happier and more comfortable in my skin, and thinking that I would never get that from reading a novel. So switching my focus from writing a novel to becoming a teacher, that I consciously made the decision that I was going to stop that thing which had been my goal, and be okay with that, be not rigidly attached to that goal. Because I'd read this other quote from somewhere that had said, people who stick rigidly to their goals end up achieving things that they used to want.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like, wow, okay. So you get something that you wanted like 10 years ago. So I was happy to go, right, that's not wasted time, that writing 1 million words or however many I'd written over all those drafts. That's teaching me to be a better writer. And now I can use my skills that I've learned as a writer to then use that for meditation and write about meditation and write about my life experiences in more kind of a non-fiction thing than fiction. So it's not wasted. It's that helped me learn all those skills to take somewhere else. But yeah, it's because even a couple of weeks ago, my friend was like, why don't you just finish it and put it out and put it under a different name? Because I had this weird competition thing with my friend who was like, I can write a novel faster than you. And he basically did. And put it out. He was like, well, come on, you just finish yours and do it. And I was like, the amount of work I would need to do to this to make it something that I would be proud of. I'm not charmed to do it, and we followed charm, and that charm went away, and I'm not rigidly attached to that format outcome, which is a way that helps me evolve, right? That's how we evolve, is that we bring new things into our life, but we also let go of the things that aren't relevant anymore. And that's just such a key lesson in what we teach and what we learn in the microcosm of meditation, that we can then apply to our life in general. That I'm like, okay, fine, I'm going to let that go. Maybe I'll come back to it one day, but I don't have to. It's not like I've given up writing as a thing. I've just said that writing fiction is not something that is my main driver now that I have Vedic meditation as something to share.
I just, I think it was on TikTok, this woman who was explaining about her journey with law, and that she had gone to school for 8 years and she had graduated, and she spent 1 year and it was out of school practicing, and she was miserable. But everybody told her, but you spent so much time or whatever. She was like, you know what, you're right. I did spend all this time. And she went, what I did was I spent 50 miserable years in law when I could have just spent 1. And it was so powerful to hear that, right, okay, she did all this stuff to prepare, cling to the goal. She got out in the world, didn't want to do it, convinced herself that she should have, did, had a successful history, but didn't enjoy it at all. And so looking back and going, yeah, okay, maybe the best thing to do is to let go of that goal. But I also love, I'm going to keep asking you, because I feel like, oh, maybe you will release it one day, or you will revisit it, and then, what's that going to be like?
Okay, thanks for sticking around until the end. This season, we would love to know what topics and themes would be of interest to you. Also, would you like to be our guest? Perhaps you might be interested in coming on the show and talking with us yourself. We'd love to have you. Please share your thoughts and ideas with us through a direct message on Instagram, or by emailing us at stories@thevedic.conversation.com. And if you enjoyed this episode, please give us a rating or review so that other people can find us. See you next time.